When the Frost Witches Wake. Four people huddle in the back of a fishing boat cutting through black Alaskan waters. Their clothes hang in tatters. Blood has dried on their faces. Frost clings to their hair and eyelashes despite the boat's heater running at full blast. None of them speak. One of them, a young woman named Elena Brooks, keeps touching her temples as if trying to push something out of her mind. Something she saw. Something she can't unsee. Behind them, Kodiak Island disappears into the fog, and somewhere beneath that island, beneath the ruins of an abandoned school, beneath the frozen earth itself, something ancient has begun to stir. It didn't catch them tonight, but it saw their faces. It learned their names, and winter always comes back. This is the story of what happened in those woods, what those four survivors witnessed, and why, even now in the middle of summer, frost still forms on their windows while they sleep. The symbols still appear in their dreams. And far below the ice, a whisper grows stronger every night. When winter comes again, I will finish waking. I want you to give me a similar, very detailed blurb. Zero plagiarism with different characters' names. Polish it even more than the original story. Horror focus. The city location must be United States, Alaskan. Convert it to Witchcraft horror focus stories. Fairy involved 3 weeks earlier. Elena Brooks had spent 2 years researching St. Kilian Middle School before she ever set foot on Kodiak Island. At 24, she worked as a data analyst in Anchorage, a job that paid the bills but never touched her soul. Her real passion lived in the abandoned places, the forgotten structures, the buildings that nature had begun to reclaim, where history whispered from every cracked wall and collapsed ceiling. Her urban exploration channel had 40,000 subscribers. St. Kilian would be her biggest video yet. The school had been abandoned in 1987 after incidents the school board refused to explain. Official records mentioned structural damage from permafrost shifts, but Elena had dug deeper. She'd found newspaper clippings about students who wandered into the basement and emerged changed. Quiet, distant, drawing the same strange symbols over and over until their parents pulled them from school entirely. She'd found resignation letters from teachers who cited personal reasons, but whose hands had clearly been shaking when they signed. And she'd found accounts from locals who swore they'd seen lights in the windows on moonless nights. Blue lights, moving in patterns that almost looked like writing. Elena didn't believe in ghosts, but she believed in good content. She recruited 3 friends for the expedition. Micah Torres, her camera operator since their college film class, steady hands, sharp eyes, and a calm that never cracked under pressure. Jonah Lee, their audio specialist, who had an almost supernatural ability to remain composed in unsettling situations. And Riley Carr, the newest member of their crew, 22 years old, eager to prove herself, and completely inexperienced with locations this remote. They flew into Kodiak on a Tuesday in late November. The cold hit Elena's lungs like swallowing broken glass the moment she stepped off the plane. This wasn't normal cold. This was something older, something that seemed to bypass clothing and skin and settle directly into bone marrow. "You smell that?" Micah asked, adjusting his camera bag. Elena inhaled slowly. Beneath the expected sense of sea salt and distant pine, something else lingered. Faint but unmistakable, sweet and wrong. Like flowers frozen mid-bloom, left to rot beneath snow for decades. Probably the cannery, Jonah offered, but the cannery was 6 miles south, and the smell came from the forest. They rented a truck and drove inland as afternoon light began to fail. The roads narrowed, the trees pressed closer. By the time they reached the access path to St. Kilian, the sky had already begun to darken, though it was barely 3 o'clock. The school emerged from the forest, like something that had grown there rather than been built. 3 stories of water-stained concrete and shattered windows, slowly sinking into the permafrost. Dense spruce trees pressed against its walls as if trying to push it deeper into the earth. Frost crawled up the foundation in patterns that seemed almost deliberate, almost intentional. "It's perfect," Riley whispered. Elena didn't respond. She was staring at the second-floor windows, where something pale had just moved behind the glass, something that had been watching them arrive. 12 miles northwest, in a cabin accessible only by a single unpaved road that would be impassable by December, Devin Hale was beginning to understand that he had made a terrible mistake. Devin was 26, a wildlife photographer who had built a modest following documenting Alaska's most remote and beautiful landscapes. He'd rented this cabin for 3 months, seeking the kind of solitude that would let him focus entirely on his work. No internet, no cell service, just himself, his cameras, and the endless white silence of the Alaskan wilderness. For the first week, everything was perfect. He photographed Arctic foxes at dawn. He captured the aurora dancing across frozen lakes. He fell asleep each night to absolute stillness, the kind of quiet that city dwellers never truly experience. Then the footsteps started. The first night, he dismissed them as an animal, a deer perhaps, or a curious moose investigating the cabin. But when he checked the next morning, the tracks outside his window were wrong. Too narrow, too deliberate, placed in a perfect circle around his cabin, as if something had been walking around and around for hours. The second night, he heard the footsteps again. This time he watched from his window, camera ready. He saw nothing. But he watched the tracks appear in the snow, one after another, as if pressed by invisible feet. The third night, the footsteps circled his cabin until dawn, and they appeared even though no new snow had fallen. On the fourth night, at exactly 3:12 a.m., something knocked on his back door. 3 soft taps, patient, almost polite. Devin didn't answer. He sat frozen in his bed, barely breathing, until the knocking stopped. The next night, at exactly 3:12 a.m., the knocking came again. Same rhythm, same gentle insistence. He didn't answer that night either. By the 6th night, Devin couldn't stand it anymore. At 3:11, he positioned himself beside the small window next to the back door, heart hammering against his ribs. 3:12 arrived. 3 soft taps. Devin looked through the window. A figure stood at the edge of the tree line. Tall, impossibly thin. Its body was wrapped in animal hides that hung in tatters, swaying slightly in a wind Devin couldn't feel. Its face was hidden behind a mask carved from something white and gleaming. Ice, he realized. Ice that seemed to glow faintly from within. Antlers rose from the mask's crown, branching upward into the darkness like frozen lightning. At the figure's feet stood something smaller, a creature no larger than a child's doll, with wings like shattered glass that caught the moonlight and fractured it into 1,000 tiny rainbows. Its eyes burned pale blue. The small creature tilted its head and smiled. Devin stumbled backward, knocking over a chair. When he looked again, both figures had vanished. But in the snow where they had stood, symbols had been scratched into the frozen ground, circles within circles, lines that curved like frozen rivers, a 6-pointed star surrounded by smaller markings. Devin photographed them with shaking hands. The next morning, more symbols appeared, different ones, scratched into the snow outside his door as if someone had taken their time, working carefully through the night. And then the whispers started. They came through his heater vents. Soft at first, almost inaudible, but Devin recognized the voices. His mother, dead for 3 years, his college girlfriend, the one who had broken his heart, his brother, living in Seattle, alive and well, but the voice coming through the vents was not his brother's voice. It was something wearing his brother's voice like a mask. "Come outside," the voices whispered. "Come see, come witness. She's waking. The queen, the beautiful one, the cold that never ends." Devin stuffed towels into every vent he could find. The whispers continued anyway. Aubrey Lennox had worked fishing boats since she was 17. 7 years of hauling nets, gutting cod, and learning to read the sea and sky better than any meteorologist. The ocean had taught her that fear was a luxury. Hesitation got you killed. You watched, you assessed, you acted. On that November night, in a crowded harbor bar called the Rusty Hook, every instinct she'd developed over 7 years began screaming at once. She'd come with her best friend Marla Pierce to celebrate the end of crab season. The bar was packed, Fishermen swapping lies about their catches, cannery workers spending their paychecks, a few tourists brave or foolish enough to visit Kodiak in winter. Music played too loud. Conversation competed with laughter. The air smelled of beer and fried food and salt-weathered skin. The two men approached their table around 11. "Mind if we join you?" They were handsome. Almost too handsome. Their features had a symmetry that felt artificial, like faces designed by committee. Their smiles showed teeth but never reached their eyes, which remained flat and watchful even as they laughed at Marla's jokes. They introduced themselves as Luke and Thomas. No last names offered, none requested. They claimed to be researchers studying local wildlife, though they deflected every question about specifics. Luke ordered a round of drinks. When the glasses arrived, Aubrey noticed something immediately. The liquid shimmered. Not the way alcohol catches light. This was different. The shimmer moved on its own, swirling in lazy patterns that reminded her of the aurora. Golden, hypnotic, wrong. "Special local recipe," Thomas said, watching her stare. "You'll love it." Marla reached for her glass. Aubrey's hand shot out, grabbing her wrist. "Bathroom, now." In the cramped, graffiti-covered bathroom, Aubrey explained what she'd seen. Marla thought she was being paranoid. Too many late nights. Too much stress. Too many old stories from her grandmother. But Aubrey's grandmother had grown up in the old villages. She'd kept a piece of driftwood locked in a chest, carved with symbols that made Aubrey's eyes hurt when she looked at them too long. She'd whispered prayers to things that weren't any god the missionaries had brought, and she'd warned Aubrey over and over about strangers with eyes like frozen lakes. "Never accept drinks from them," her grandmother had said. "Never follow them into the dark, and if you ever see the lights dancing wrong, run." They returned to the table with a plan. "Sorry," Aubrey said, sliding back into her seat with practiced clumsiness. "Got distracted talking. Which glass is mine again?" Luke pointed. Aubrey reached for it, brought it toward her lips, then pretended to stumble against the table. In the confusion, she switched her glass with his. Marla did the same with Thomas. "Long season," Aubrey laughed. "Makes you clumsy." They raised their glasses. They drank. Within 30 seconds, Luke and Thomas slumped forward onto the table. Their breathing slowed to almost nothing. Their skin began to pale, taking on a faint blue tinge, as if frost were forming beneath the surface. "What the hell?" Marla whispered. Aubrey stared at the untouched drinks in front of them, the ones meant for her and Marla. The shimmering liquid had begun to change, solidifying, crystallizing into patterns that looked almost like writing, runes, the same kind of runes her grandmother had kept locked away. The aurora outside blazed suddenly bright, casting strange shadows through the bar's windows. Colors that shouldn't exist pulsed across the sky, green and blue and something else, something that hurt to look at directly. Every glass in the bar rattled, and somewhere in the distance, carried on wind that shouldn't have been able to reach them through walls and windows and bodies, Aubrey heard singing. High, sweet, impossibly old. "We need to find out where they came from," Aubrey said. Luke's wallet contained a driver's license with a local address. 20 minutes later, Aubrey and Marla stood outside a small apartment on the edge of town, the door unlocked, the interior dark. They went inside. The smell hit them first. That same sweet rot Aubrey had noticed on the stranger's breath, frozen flowers left to decay. The apartment was small, cluttered, and wrong. So wrong. Charms hung from every surface, dozens of them, made from bone, small bones, animal bones, maybe something else. They swayed gently in a breeze that didn't exist, clicking together like wind chimes made of teeth. Jars lined the shelves, filled with white powder that seemed to glow faintly. Powdered ice, Aubrey realized. Ice that never melted, and covering every wall sketches, hundreds of sketches, creatures with wings like shattered glass, figures in antlered masks, and one image repeated over and over, larger than all the others. A woman, beautiful, terrible, with wings like frozen waterfalls and eyes like twin suns burned down to embers. the Fey Queen, the one Aubrey's grandmother had warned her about in hushed tones late at night when she thought Aubrey was already asleep. A light flared outside the window, brilliant, blinding, coming from the southeast, from the forest, from the old school. Marla grabbed Aubrey's arm. "What is that?" Aubrey didn't answer. She was already moving toward the door, toward her truck, toward the light. She didn't know why. She just knew she had to see. Elena's flashlight cut through the darkness of St. Kilian's basement like a blade that wasn't sharp enough. The beam seemed to lose strength down here, swallowed by shadows that pressed in from every direction. The walls glistened with moisture that shouldn't exist. The basement was below the permafrost line, frozen solid for decades. Nothing should be wet. "Getting this?" she whispered. Micah nodded, camera steady despite the cold that made their breath form clouds. His lens captured everything, the peeling paint, the collapsed shelving, the strange marks on the concrete floor. They'd explored the upper floors first, unsettling but mundane, water damage, graffiti, the expected debris of abandonment. But the basement was different. It was warm, wrong warm, the kind of warmth that radiated from infected wounds, from feverish skin. The air smelled sweet and rotten, that frozen flower scent concentrated to a choking intensity. "Look at this," Jonah said. He'd found something on the wall, a symbol, painted in something white and faintly luminescent, fresh, still wet. A six-pointed star surrounded by circles, with smaller markings branching off like frozen lightning or the veins of a dying leaf. "Is it moving?" Riley whispered. She was right. The symbol pulsed, expanded and contracted so subtly that Elena almost convinced herself it was a trick of the light. Almost. "It's breathing," Micah said. "The paint is breathing." A sound from behind them, something soft, something falling. They turned. Micah's backpack, secured tightly to his shoulders moments ago, now sat in the center of the basement floor, arranged carefully within a six-pointed glacial star that hadn't been there before. Small polished stones encircled it, placed with obvious deliberation. The stones hummed, low, almost below the range of human hearing. Elena felt the vibration in her chest, in her teeth, in the soft tissue behind her eyes. "I didn't take it off," Micah said. His voice cracked. "Elena, I didn't... We're leaving. Now." They ran for the stairs, burst onto the first floor, and stopped. Figures sat in what had once been the cafeteria. 6 of them, hooded, arranged in a perfect circle. In their hands they rolled small spheres that glowed with pale inner light. The spheres chimed as they moved, soft, musical, deeply wrong, like bells ringing underwater, like children laughing in empty rooms. Riley made a sound, something between a gasp and a sob. Every hooded figure turned toward them, in perfect unison, and rose. They moved wrong, not like people standing, like puppets being lifted by invisible strings. Their limbs didn't bend quite right, their heads tilted at angles that should have broken necks. "Run," Elena said. They ran. The figures didn't chase. They simply appeared. Every exit Elena tried. Hooded forms blocked the way. Every corridor she turned down, more figures emerged from doorways, from shadows, from spaces too small to hold them. They were being herded, pushed deeper into the school. Upward. Elena grabbed Riley's hand, pulling her through a doorway she hadn't tried yet. The hallway beyond was collapsing, ceiling tiles scattered across the floor, walls buckling inward, but it was empty. Something caught her eye. A section of wall where the paint had peeled away, revealing older layers beneath. Much older. She stopped. "Elena, we have to go," Jonah started. "Look." Beneath the decades of institutional beige, beneath the water stains and mold, a mural emerged. Ancient. Faded, but still visible. 6 figures knelt in a circle, their faces hidden beneath hoods. Before them stood a 7th figure, taller, more terrible, with wings spread wide and eyes that the unknown artist had painted as twin golden suns. A Fey Queen, and the 6 kneeling figures, the witches, wore the same robes as the things currently hunting them through these halls. The Frostbound Coven, Elena breathed. The name came to her from somewhere, an old article, a whispered rumor, something half remembered from her research. They're real. They're still here. A chime sounded behind them. Close. Too close. They ran again. Devin wasn't sure when he'd started walking. One moment he'd been huddled in his cabin, towels stuffed into vents, hands over his ears to block out the whispers that came anyway. The next he was outside, moving through the snow-covered forest, following lights that pulsed between the trees. Blue, white, and that other color. The one that didn't have a name, the one that hurt to look at but made him unable to look away. The winter fae flew beside him, its crystalline wings catching the aurora's light. "She's waking," it whispered. Its voice was wind through dead branches, icicles shattering against stone. The queen, the beautiful one, the cold that never ends. And you're chosen, all of you. Chosen to witness, chosen to feed, chosen to remember. Devin tried to stop walking. His legs wouldn't obey. The Frostbound Coven has kept her sleeping for so long, fed her dreams with small offerings. But tonight the ritual completes. Tonight she rises. And you'll be there to see it. The school emerged from the trees. Devin saw lights blazing from the second-floor windows. That impossible blue, that burning white. He heard screaming inside, running footsteps, shattering glass. A truck skidded to a stop in front of the building. 2 women jumped out, one with dark hair pulled back tight, moving with the efficiency of someone who'd spent years on fishing boats. The other younger, terrified, but following anyway. They ran toward the building's entrance. Devin kept walking, following them, unable to stop. The school swallowed them all. Inside, Elena and her friends had been pushed to the second floor. Every stairwell down was blocked by hooded figures. Every window they passed showed more shapes outside, pale forms moving between trees, watching, waiting. They burst through double doors into what had once been the gymnasium, and stopped. The floor had cracked open. A fissure ran through the center of the room, 6 feet wide, descending into darkness that shouldn't exist. The gym was on the second floor. There should be classrooms below, not an endless void. Blue light blazed from the fissure, not fire. Something colder, something that burned without heat. The hooded figures filed in behind them, taking positions around the fissure's edge. 6 of them, 6 points of the star. Aubrey and Marla burst through a side door, both women freezing at the sight. Devin stumbled in moments later, eyes unfocused, movements jerky and strange. The winter fae fluttered above his shoulder, wings chiming. "Witness," the fae commanded. The hooded figures began to chant. The language scraped against Elena's ears like ice on glass. Each word brought a new sensation, cold deeper than winter, pressure like being buried under snow, the smell of frozen flowers so strong she gagged. The ground shook. Something began to rise from the fissure. Wings came first, vast, translucent, spreading outward like frozen waterfalls, like sheets of ice caught mid-shatter. They filled the gymnasium, brushing against walls, against ceiling, against the survivors huddled near the doors. Then a face emerged, beautiful beyond human measure, terrible beyond human understanding. Eyes like twin suns that had burned so long they'd frozen solid, casting cold light instead of warmth. The Fae Queen of Winter, the one who had taken fishermen from these shores for centuries, leaving empty boats and stories whispered in fear. The one who had demanded tribute from the old villages, children left on frozen lakes, blood spilled on sacred stones. The one the frost-bound coven had worshipped and fed and kept sleeping since before the first Europeans ever saw Alaska's coast. She was waking, and she saw them. Her gaze found Elena first, then Aubrey, then Devin, Micah, Marla, Jonah, Riley, one by one, learning their faces, memorizing their features. She smiled. The Fae children swarmed. They erupted from the fissure. Dozens of them, hundreds, creatures the size of dolls with wings like shattered glass and eyes like frozen stars. They filled the air, shrieking in voices too high to properly hear, diving at the survivors, clawing at their clothes and hair and exposed skin. The witches lunged. The gymnasium floor cracked further, chunks of it falling into the blue-burning void below. The ceiling began to collapse. Walls buckled outward, and outside, through the shattered windows, Elena saw the impossible. The forest itself was moving, trees uprooting themselves, crawling toward the school on root legs, reaching with branch arms, the entire woods converging on St. Kilian, as if the Queen's awakening had called every living thing to witness, or to trap them inside. "Run!" Aubrey shouted. She grabbed the nearest person, Marla, and dragged her toward the side door they'd entered through. Elena seized Riley's hand. Jonah pulled Devon, snapping him out of whatever trance the Fae had put him in. Micah brought up the rear, still filming, camera capturing chaos. They ran. The Fae children dove at them. Elena felt crystalline claws rake her face, drawing blood that froze before it could drip. Marla screamed as tiny wings tangled in her hair. Devon stumbled, nearly fell, was hauled upright by Jonah. Behind them, the Queen continued to rise. Her wings unfolded further. Her mouth opened. She laughed. The sound was frost forming on warm skin. The moment before frostbite set in, that terrible, peaceful numbness. Every Alaskan winter that had ever taken a life concentrated into a single voice. They burst out of St. Kilian into snow and chaos. Trees blocked their path, not fallen, but standing, having moved to surround the building. "The truck!" Aubrey shouted. Her vehicle was somehow still clear, a narrow gap between the converging trees, barely wide enough to drive through. They ran for it. The hooded witches emerged from the school behind them, moving in that wrong puppet-like way. The Fae children swarmed overhead, diving and shrieking. And from inside, from the collapsed gymnasium, the Queen's voice echoed, "Run, little witnesses, run and spread my name. Every whisper feeds me. Every nightmare makes me stronger." They piled into the truck. Aubrey gunned the engine. The vehicle lurched forward, scraping against reaching branches, tires spinning on snow before catching. "The harbor," Aubrey said. "We need a boat. We need off this island." Behind them, the lights of St. Kilian blazed brighter than the aurora itself. The drive was a blur of terror. Trees seemed to lean toward the road as they passed. Shapes moved in the darkness between them, tall shapes, thin shapes, figures in masks watching from the shadows. The Fae children followed for miles, their crystalline wings catching moonlight, before finally falling back. The harbor appeared like salvation. A fishing captain up late saw their terror and asked no questions. He started his engine and pulled away from the dock before they'd even finished explaining. Kodiak Island shrank behind them. The lights of St. Kilian faded into fog. But Elena knew, they all knew, that they hadn't truly escaped. They'd been released. The Queen didn't need to catch them. She'd already planted her seeds, in their minds, in their memories, in the frost that now formed on their skin, even in warm rooms. Through the boat's rear windows, Elena watched the aurora blaze one final time. And just for a moment, so brief she almost convinced herself she'd imagined it, she saw a face in the lights. Beautiful, terrible, smiling, the face of someone who had all the time in the world. The ritual had been interrupted. The Queen had sunk back into her frozen cavern, her awakening incomplete. But not stopped, never stopped, just delayed. 3 months passed. Elena woke in her Anchorage apartment to find symbols scratched into her window, from the inside, in her own handwriting. Marla stopped sleeping. Every time she closed her eyes, she dreamed in that ancient language, the one the witches had chanted. She understood more of it each night.